Good afternoon, dear forum participants. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in this very important forum. My name is Dragana Trifković and I lead the Center for Geostrategic Studies in Serbia. I will try to present my views on current topics in the next 10 to 15 minutes, which are scheduled for the presentation of the participants. We are living in a time of huge, one may say, tectonic changes, which will affect the world we live in, the way of life habits, interpersonal relations, and in general all spheres of human life. In order not to get into a situation where we are silent observers of these processes and leave our destiny in the hand of people who have called themselves to solve problems, for which, by the way, they are largely responsible, we must actively get involved in social events. One of the big reasons why people are not so involved is that they are completely confused by the amount of information they receive that they cannot interpret. In fact, misinforming people is a designed paralyzing factor. Therefore, we have to try to make things clear to people, although it is not always so easy. For example, Agenda 21, which is the topic of this forum, is a document adopted in the 1992 at the UN International Conference dedicated to development and environment. This document contains over 350 pages, and Agenda 2030 is a document adopted at the UN Summit in 2015, and Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 are actually an integral document, where the 2030 version contains more details on its implementation and adds 17 new Sustainable Development Goals. A large part of the content of both documents is also in the Great Reset. The goal of these programs can be found: sustainable development, eradication of poverty, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, preservation of biodiversity, quality education, etc. And really, at the first glance, everything seems like a wish list. However, what is worrying is that such plans come from those technocratic, political and business elites gathered in numerous organizations which in recent decades have led to the degradation of all of the above, including education, then a huge economic crisis, management crisis and political crisis, degradation, the institutions of the states and the rule of law, violence of human rights, security crisis, increasing poverty and stratification of society, destruction of the middle class, and so on. I would also add that Klaus Schwab and King Charles do not instill even a little confidence in my personally that behind the plans they promote hide altruistic intentions. So the first thing we must state is that the international institutions that were created after the Second World War, such as the UN and the World Health Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, the International Criminal Court, the World Trade Organization, and others, in the period of the monopolar world order, i.e., the absolute dominance of the United States of America, were corrupt, often abused, and that is this since they lost their original purpose as independent platforms for dialogue and discussion to solve the world problems. These international institutions, which were meant to be politically independent, fell under the huge influence of the United States in the past 3 or 4 decades and became a tool in America's foreign policy or an exponent of big capital. In this regard, any programs and plans that are directly related to the listed world organizations automatically raise suspicion if we know that these world organizations are corrupted and abused. This means that, above all, it is extremely necessary for international organizations to be reformed, if possible, and to return to their original purpose. Apart from international institutions, state institutions have also weakened in the last few decades, although formally the West advocates the policy of the rule of law, democracy, and the protection of human rights and freedoms. We can state that this policy is advocated by the West only in words. Let's take the example of any European country where politicians come to power who do not have the support of the citizens, where people are disenfranchised and censorships reach such proportions that it has suppressed even the worst communist dictatorship. There are also degrading processes that led to the destruction of culture, history, tradition, and religion as well. Citizens' trust in the state institutions is seriously and with reason damaged. To conclude, the globalist elites have been manipulating the government system and finances of humanity for years in order to create the conditions that will enable a new beginning, i.e., the agenda. They use wars and economic crises to weaken national sovereignty while building their own power through global institutions such as the UN, the IMF, and others. But let's go back to Agenda 21 on sustainable development. This term, sustainable development, is mentioned many times in the comprehensive document. However, in addition to numerous chapters concerning the protection of water, land, then the rights of workers, women, and so on, you will not find a single chapter concerning the protection of a basic human right, which is the right to freedom. If we take into account the fact that during the recent COVID-19 pandemic, people's rights were massively taken away, from the right to free movement to the imposition of other numerous restrictions, then we can rightly ask why this strategic global document does not mention human liberties and why not a single chapter is dedicated to freedom. As someone with an engineering education directly related to environmental protection, I can say that sustainable development sounds promising at first glance, and that the document itself, when you read it, seems quite acceptable. Just reading and interpreting these documents requires a lot of concentration because the wording is largely general, the definitions too extensive, but undefined to the end. Therefore, even an expert, when he reads the agenda, has no idea how it should be implemented in the practice and what its implementation actually means. However, as someone who deals with the geopolitics and knows many facts related to this comprehensive topic, I can say that it is necessary to delve deeper into the background and intentions of this document. Considering that I am from Serbia, I can say that we have several decades of experience with the interpretation of international documents in practice, where the contracting parties have completely different perception of the concluded agreements. In many cases, Western countries even completely ignore international law and existing agreements and illegally create a different reality. This is the case with the separatist creation of Kosovo, a fake state that was created by the collective West's complete ignoring of the valid UN Security Council Resolution 1244. I will quote Ron Paul, one of my favorite American politicians and thinkers, who in a column for the Eurasia Review portal declared the Great Reset an attempt to expand state power and stifle freedom around the world, according to an authoritarian model in which large corporations would be in partnership with governments. Therefore, respected Ron Paul also believes that proposed agenda, which is rounded off by the Great Reset, represent an introduction to totalitarianism, the abolition of human freedoms, and submission to the interest of large corporations. The agenda certainly has a global character, so it applies to all countries, which leads to doubt that it is a plan to introduce strict management that leads to global control and global surveillance. In my opinion, it is a plan of the globalist elites who, as we stated, have already led to a general political, economic, and security crisis, to maintain their positions as global leaders, offering false promises. On the other hand, we have a group of countries that advocate multilateralism and are gathered in the BRICS organization. It is a group of large states that can oppose globalist structures and offer an alternative platform for a new world architecture that would include state sovereignty, human freedoms, respect for diversity, preservation of culture, history, tradition, and so on. If we reduce things to a minimum for a better understanding, the current conflict is between two different value systems. However, what is worrying is that the BRICS countries have also included Agenda 2030 in their future plans. At the recently held BRICS summit in the Republic of South Africa, the leaders of the member states signed declarations committing themselves to strengthening cooperation in order to promote peace, a more representative international order, a reviewed and reformed multilateral system, sustainable development, and inclusive growth. At the same time, they expressed the hope that the next UN summit will mean an opportunity to renew international commitment to the 2030 agenda. However, at the same time, in the declaration, BRICS advocates for a comprehensive reform of the UN, respect for international law, respect for human rights, condemns the policy of double standards, and demands a fairer distribution of quotas in the IMF, a different approach of the World Trade Organization toward underdeveloped countries, etc. Such types of reforms can be a guarantee that the project of sustainable development cannot be abused by selected representatives of the interest of large companies. In any case, it is necessary to follow the current events with the utmost attention because our future will largely depend on them. It is essential that we do not allow topics such as development, progress, environmental protection, and the like to be misused as has been done with the topics of democracy, protection of human rights, and the like. Finally, public resistance can play a big role if the public manages to mobilize and does not succumb to restrictions and manipulations. Thank you for your attention.